If the WTO promotes international trade, why does the SCM agreement prohibit export subsidies? Part 2 of the SCM agreement accords the strict treatment to two types of subsidies, namely export subsidies and domestic content subsidies, because of their evident trade restoring effects. Recall that these subsidies are deemed to be specific and is also not necessary to show that they cause adverse effects. Once the requirements of Article 3 are demonstrated, the subsidies are simply prohibited by the agreement. Article 3.1a of the SCM agreement deals with export subsidies. This provision prohibits subsidies contingent in law or in fact upon export performance. Footnote 4 clarifies that the mere granting of a subsidy to an enterprise that export by itself shall not be considered an export subsidy. Therefore, an important part of the analysis needs to focus on the actual relationship of contingency between export and the subsidy. The appellate body in Canada Aircraft explained that the ordinary meaning of the term contingent is conditional or dependent. Therefore, Article 3.18 prohibits subsidies that are conditional upon or dependent on export performance. The appellate body has emphasized that the crux of the legal standard to be applied here is the relationship of contingency or dependence. In other words, that the granting of a subsidy be tied to the actual or anticipated export performance. This legal standard is the same for export contingency both in law and in fact. Contingency in law, also known as de jure contingency, is somewhat simpler, since it is established on the basis of the terms of the relevant legislation. That is to say, a situation in which the condition to export is clearly evident in the instrument comprising the measure. Measures already found to be de jure contingent upon export performance include subsidies conditioned upon a requirement that a property produced in a country be used outside that country, and 2, subsidies conditioned upon a production to sales ratio requirement. In order to prevent circumvention of the prohibition against export contingency in law, the Uruguay round negotiators decided that Article 3.1a would also prohibit export contingency in fact. However, proving de facto export contingency is a much more difficult, complex task than proving de jure export contingency, since there is no single document which will demonstrate on its face that a subsidy is contingent in fact upon export performance. Thus, de facto export contingency must be inferred from the total configuration of the facts relating to the granting of a subsidy. And since this, of course, depends on the particular facts of the case, there can be no general rule as what facts or what kinds of facts must be taken into account. Factors that have been considered in the past include export and sales performance targets and information called for in applications for subsidies. Finally, we need to keep in mind that the export subsidy prohibition in Article 3.1a does not apply to a developing country member that complies with the obligations in Article 27.4 of the SCM agreement. Now, to come back to our initial question, the WTO does promote international trade. It was agreed under the SCM agreement that export subsidies are inherently so distorting of international trade, always giving an advantage to the domestic producers at the expense of foreign competition in international markets, that they should be per se prohibited. This was the solution agreed by WTO members to help international trade to continue to flow undistorted. Thank you.
好，我们来看一下本期的中英文文本和重点词句。First one, to accord the strict treatment to 给予了严格的处理，对什么什么给予了严格的处理 accord 给予。Next one, domestic content subsidies 国产成分补贴。Domestic 国内的 content 国内的内容，国产成分。Next one, adverse effects, 不利影响。Next one, be simply prohibited, 被简单的禁止。简单的怎么理解呢？就是不需要经过复杂的推理和适用法定条件、法律构成要件，就简单的、直接的被禁止了。Next one, contingent, 附条件的，依条件而定的。Contingent upon export performance, 以出口业绩为依据为条件。Next one, relationship of contingency, 权变关系，也就是依条件而变化，依条件视情况而定的关系。权变关系 contingency 翻译为权变。Next one, crux 是关键的意思。Next one, relationship of contingency or dependence, 权变关系或者依赖关系。用了一个 relationship， 后边这两个词用 or 来连接。Next one, anticipated, 预期的。前面的 actual 实际的，后面是预期的出口业绩。Next one, export contingency, 出口权变。Next one, contingency in law, 法律上的权变。Next one, 还有一个 contingency in fact, 事实上的权变。当然 also known as the jury's contingency, 这是对前面这个术语 contingency in law 的一个同义替换解释，因此在翻译成汉语的时候就不必翻译为两次，因为都是一个意思。Next one, the condition to export, comprising the measure. 注意这个 comprising the measure 构成国内措施的这样一种条件，出口条件。因此注意这个 comprising 修饰的不是和它紧挨着的这个 instrument 文件，而是前面这个出口条件。因此翻译为构成措施的，构成一国采取的措施的那个出口条件，在文书中是明确的。OK, next one, sales reach, 销售范围。reach 是范围的意思，当然它也有达到的意思，到达的意思。这里它是一个名词，范围。OK, next one, total configuration 是总体结构 ，total 是总体的 ，configuration 是结构的意思。Next one, particular facts 具体事实。Next one, export and sales performance targets 出口和销售业绩目标 targets 目标的意思。Next one, called for 指的是，这是过去分词做定语 ，information called for 就是被要求提供的信息。Information is called for 信息被要求提供。OK, next one, export subsidy prohibition 出口补贴禁令，出口补贴禁令。Prohibition 禁止，这里指的是禁令了。OK, next one, does promote 确实这也是一个语气助词。Next one, inherently 本意是内在的、固有的，当然这里我们可以把它翻译为本质上，本质上的是如此的具有扭曲性。本质上如此的扭曲了国际贸易，以至于因此后边这个 that 其实是一个短语 so 怎么样 that so that 引导的从句，以至于 它们本质上 per se 是本质上，因此我们也可以认为 inherently 和 per se 是同义替换。好，本期分享就是这些，请大家点赞，请大家关注，我们下期再见。